two years ago, I guess. I still have the slides so I still remember all the stuff, but in taking the site performance from around the 5 to 7 second load time down to sub 2 seconds and how that happened. So, and then I've asked Rob from Docker, who is here and not sick yet.
And has t-shirts and stickers.
And t-shirts and stickers.
Which more than one size.
More, thank you. And not sheets of stickers. He's going to give a more extended conversation about how Docker and Kubernetes are integrated. And, but Rob is not technical, so please ask as many questions as possible. So to get started, again, there's my other slide. DevOps Days Raleigh, CFPs are closed. We got a ton of submissions. I think there's like 40 Ignite submissions, something like 10 or 15 workshop submissions. I've submitted to one of them, so that one's a shoo-in. The other ones, don't know. But no, there's some absolutely amazing speakers. A lot of guys coming in from the West Coast that are Silicon Valley guys. So that's really exciting. So now at this point, you can either A, sponsor us, B, follow on Twitter, which everyone should, I don't know why, and then give us feedback. So how we're doing, what you guys thought of last year if you went, and then of course, how you guys feel about this year. So it should be pretty large. We had, oh yeah.
Are you looking for volunteers?
Yes. So just email that bottom email that goes to all of us. Like I think there's 10 of us on the organization committee, and then we'll get in touch with you and ask. We don't have a ton of people for the like day of volunteering yet, so that would be perfect if that's what you're interested in. Cool. Topic over here. Any first timers? Excellent. And please come again. I think you guys are with the goal. Yes, excellent. So glad to see you guys out here. I was warned you. And then anyone looking for a job right now? Want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a web developer currently at AT&T, but I'm going to be switching. What I'd like to do is switch out to a Scrum Master.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Fill that version.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a change. Excellent. Anyone hiring?
Yes, we're going to entice you if you weren't looking. This is an awesome place to work. If you like my small pitch for development, continuous delivery pipelines, or automated CM approvals, we also are building a killer product for doctors, researchers. We have a consumer-facing mobile app. We need help building all of that, mostly JavaScript. If you're excited about any technology in the CD, CI pipeline, or just development in general, React, React Native, JavaScript, please come talk to me. It's way better than your current job. Guaranteed.
And I will add that Docker has their North American support hub in Raleigh, off the Plain Road across from the Hibernian, which is an awesome location, especially for lunch. We are hiring both support and consultants. So if you have interest, you don't necessarily need to have Docker background, believe it or not. The first 12 hires or so we did, there weren't that many people with Docker experience. So if you're interested at all, I have cards. Feel free to hit me up. We're probably going to be hiring 50 to 70 people in that office for next year.
And do we have any car people in here? No one cares about that. Rob's excellent to talk to you about cars if you just want to know him about that.
No, that's not annoyance. That's like,
so this is my show. So moving on, real quick, Hayes, yes, Hayes, our year-long supporter of pizza and food, except that one time that Matt Lavin's wife ordered it in the clutch spot to deliver it to us.
I'll tell her thanks.
Yes, so Matt did not order it, his wife did, and she did an amazing job. So
If you don't like
round of applause for his wife. We were originally going to pivot over to him talking about the love for his wife for an hour.
I think you can do it for him.
So real quick, Mallory's going to come up here, just go over some of the jobs they have currently looking, and there is a networking event on Monday at Isaac something or another tavern.
Isaac Hunter's.
Isaac Hunter's Tavern, and that's with Advisor.
Yeah, one of my clients. Yep. All right, so I'm Mallory Cass. I'm with Hayes. I'm the team lead of client relations out there. We've been working with Chris for a long time, with Do Solutions for a long time. And Megan Lloyd is usually here with me. She's one of my senior recruiters on my team, but she's not able to make it tonight because there's another DevOps meetup group next week that she will be at. But last time we did pass out some of our jobs that we have open right now. So we have all of the information and some really exciting points about each of the jobs. And so I'm going to do like a take one and pass around, even if you say you're not looking. So you guys can kind of take a look at what we have open, and it has her contact information on it. And then as far as a networking event is concerned, it is in association with one of my clients that I'm working with, because they have a lot of open positions, and it's a really exciting company, a lot of great new opportunities, and they're just kind of looking to get their name out there. So it's free food and drink. We're sponsoring it. It's downtown, 5 to 7 p.m. on Monday night. That's coming up Monday the 16th. And it's not just DevOps that they're looking for. They do have 3 DevOps engineer openings, senior DevOps and 2 mid-level DevOps. And then they have a couple of lead positions, React, Java, Scala, what else? There's a couple of QA positions. So a lot going on there. They're going to have their CEO, their COO, and their CIO all present at the event. We have like probably 15 or 20 people signed up right now. I know it doesn't sound like a ton, but I had only like 3 weeks to plan this thing for them. So I'm going to pass this information around. And even like I said, even if you're not looking, I mean, please come out to the networking event and you can learn a little bit more. So if you guys want to take these, and I'll start these here and I'll start these back here and pass them around.
All right, cool. Yeah, so a couple last minute self-promotion stuff. Hey, I'm running this. Chris Short, who used to run this meetup group with me, and I was involved as well. We recorded this Discussing DevOps Details podcast about refactoring infrastructure monoliths. So if you guys want to give a listen to that, it's called the 3D DevOps Podcast. And then we've also secured funding for sponsorship for our main podcast called Set Up for Failure, which is the 2 of us as well. So that should be coming down the pipe within the next 2 to 3 weeks or month. So I'll be sending that out to the meetup group as well. And so if you want to hear me talk even more, that's the opportunity. So I'm going to hand this off to Rob. I'm going to not butcher his last name, and I just call him Dr. Rob, and you can too. That works, right? And there you go, man.
Start sharing my screen. You unshare, please? Yeah. Well, it's not cooperating with me for some reason, but it'll be close enough. Oh, that works. Cool. I'm assuming everyone in the room is familiar with Docker at this point. Hands up if you know what Docker does to make money. I have one. So I'm part of Docker Inc. My name is Rob. I'm the sales rep for the Carolinas. I'm, I think, salesperson number 2 and employee number 250. I was with Red Hat for 10 years before that, where I sold Linux and a little bit of OpenShift before I saw the light side of the force and came over to Team Blue. And as I mentioned, we're building out our support office here in Cary, North Carolina, or Raleigh, North Carolina, rather. So the way Docker makes money is we have an open source project, similar to the Red Hat model. But we also have an enterprise product. So if you want things that release at a little slower pace and have security features and things like that built into them, trusted registry, image provenance, like where does my image come from and how did it get here, and does the person who built it still have good rights within my my organization? That's what enterprise offers. The beauty of it, in my mind, and one of the reasons I came here, is that it keeps on pace with the open source engine. So if at any point an enterprise customer says, you know what, enterprise is not for me, let's go back to open source, there's no lock-in. It's an annual contract, and it's all based off the same thing. One of the things that Red Hat did very well 10 or 15 years ago, and we're kind of emulating that model because they've been very successful with it. So a couple things. Docker Enterprise is made up of 3 pieces. It's the engine, which I think you're all familiar with from the open open source community. It's also, we call it a manager of managers. So it's like a pane of glass for your orchestration. Traditionally, that has been, it's called Universal Control Plane, it's called UCP. Traditionally, that has been for Swarm only, which is our open source orchestrator that maybe like 10% of the world uses. Everybody uses Kubernetes. On Monday, and this is technically confidential, but we have like 3 business hours until it's over, or 3 business days until it's public. I'm not going to worry about it. We're going to be releasing Kubernetes as part of our distribution as an option for customers. So that means if you are a Docker Enterprise customer, you can choose to run either Swarm as your orchestrator or Kubernetes, or we actually have customers who are doing both. We find that there's use cases for both. Swarm is like, keep it simple, stupid. I set up a swarm of Minecraft servers at my house for my kids. Like, I can do it on a sales guy. Kubernetes is a little bit more involved. In addition to that, we did some pretty cool wrapping with our UCP product in Kubernetes. I should back up a bit. The version of Kubernetes we're using is the upstream version. It is not a modified version. In keeping with what we sell you, we want you to be able to get off of if you decide we sell it. So that's what we're taking with the Kubernetes side. So it's not like what Red Hat does, where it's a modified version. It's pure 1.18 is what we're shipping with, which is a little bit old, but we found the newer version not to be enterprise ready. So that's going to be shipped next week as a GA product, which means not only do we provide it to you, we provide it to you in a way that you can set up in 30 minutes or less. I had my SE, I sat there with a clock and let my engineer see if he could do it before a customer meeting in a coffee shop on their Wi-Fi, and he did for a basic setup. It also means that you can call Docker for support on Kubernetes issues. So to my knowledge, we're probably the biggest company or the most enterprise company that offers support on full upstream Kube. It's not a special fork version, it is plain old Kubernetes. So that's the big announcement for next week. I can go into a little bit on how we're going to do it, but again, I'm not technical, so it's going to be pretty high level. But one other thing I do want to mention to all my people that are interested in Docker is if you go to training.docker.com, you'll see the typical sales stuff, like here's how you can pay and get training from Global Knowledge or whomever. Here's how you get certifications. But also on that page is hands-on labs. And that's something that we offer free to anybody. I highly suggest you take that whether you're interested in Docker Enterprise or not. It walks you through literally like what does a Docker image look like, build your first container, to setting up a swarm, to setting up UCP, all of that stuff. I took it before I started Docker, and I found it hugely helpful to visualize and get my hands on the product that I would be selling. And I think it's a great place to start for maybe you guys are more advanced, but for coworkers who are interested in looking and learning about containers, and it's free. So absolutely take advantage of that. Before I get into this a little more detail, are there any questions about Docker? We're not dead, by the way. I think we just got some lag. Yes, we do. So the whole point of putting Kubernetes into our distribution is to make it easy, like I mentioned, quick setup. We actually wrap Kubernetes in our UCP product, which is part of the Docker Enterprise offering. So again, Kubernetes is not modified in any way. We actually modified our own product to be able to deliver Kubernetes. So if you look under the hood, and I know most of you probably would anyway, Kubernetes is actually deployed via Swarm. It doesn't affect Kubernetes in any way, but it's just was the easiest way we could think of to hit the easy button and install Kubernetes instead of taking several hours. The other really cool thing we did for our enterprise customers is beyond support, which I already talked about. We integrated all the security features that I won't get into now that we include in our enterprise product from UCP, like signed images, image provenance, binary level scanning, secrets that aren't in plain text, that's kind of a big deal, into the Kubernetes deployment. We also had I don't know what you want to call it, it's a translation tool. So if you've already built stuff in Swarm today, open source or enterprise, in your YAML file, and you want to now deploy that in Kubernetes, you can literally cut and paste it to this tool, and it'll spit out the Kubernetes kube control YAML files. And we're working on the tool to go the other way as well. So if you have use cases where you want to flip-flop between the other, or for whatever reason you need to move, we're going to be offering that to our enterprise customers as well. Again, this kind of falls in the model that Docker is Sure. Yeah.
So do you have people who already run production Kubes and Swarm on your Docker Enterprise, and can you see a performance difference between the two?
So we don't have anybody running Kube in production because I would yell at them if they were my customer because it hasn't GA'd yet.
Okay.
We do for Swarm. So we have had customers run Kubernetes standalone versus Swarm. From an overhead perspective, it's pretty much equal.
Okay.
And from a high level, from a sales guy perspective, I find that there are specific use cases with Kubernetes that make more sense because it has such a much broader ecosystem and community base to it. Finding a driver for something, finding an API call for something that works better with Kubernetes is much more likely than Swarm. But if you're setting up something that's fairly straightforward, Swarm works really well. Like, anybody have MetLife benefits in this room of any sort? If you've ever called them to make a claim or to change anything or interface with their website, that's running on Docker globally. That's 6 million people, 6 million users a week, and that's on Swarm. So it's not like a scalability issue. It's more of a modularity. Kubernetes has many more components and therefore has many more options. Swarm is a little more streamlined. Does that make sense? Yes. What else was I going to mention about Kubernetes? That was a big deal. We talked about security. We talked about the fact that we'll support it. We talked about the translation tool. And we talked about the fact that we're only going to do the full upstream version. I think that's all I've got. Take the free training. If anybody's interested in having me talk to anybody on your team more about Docker, I live here in the area. I'm up in Hillsborough. Feel free to take a card, and you can come see me. I have stickers, and I have T-shirts for the first few that come over there and don't trample each other. Sure. Were there questions or T-shirts?
Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
So since you guys are running this on top of Swarm, does that mean that you're running the Kubelet in a container?
We are running the, yes, that's correct.
So like with the upstream things, they have like Hypercube and stuff, they specifically say to run it, to run kubeproxy, to run Kubelet, all that outside of containers. Are you guys doing something? What are you guys doing there?
So I don't know what we're doing technically, but I can tell you that we support many Fortune 100 companies who plan to go into production on this. And I promise whatever we decided we took into consideration how we are going to support it as well. Okay. I'm happy to come out and talk to you and your team with my engineer who could deep dive into specifically how we're doing it, but that's a little beyond my. Okay. Is there another question?
Yes, my question.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's all I got. Come see me for swag.
And Rob obviously knows this, but Dude Solutions will be one of the first beta customers to go. They're going to come out. We're going to set up Kubernetes on Docker with the whole thing. So I'll be able to talk about it at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's right.
If anyone has any questions, just bring it up when I'm there, and I can tell you kind of how it went for us and how great of support we got. Some butterflies and rainbows. Okay, what does everyone want to do? So this is a fun question. I can talk about site performance. Matt can talk about air gaps. Rob can talk about Mercedes wagons. Or we can watch the YouTube.
Air gaps?
Air gaps.
CD would be cool.
So what?
CD.
Yeah, you're up, man.
I saw that comment.
Because everything boils down to security in the end. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. How much time is there? Do you know?
7:40.
Okay. I'm just gonna shoot for 30 minutes or so. Let's see how that goes. All right, so full disclosure, this is a presentation that's presented by 3 different people, and I'm just going to cover all the parts, but I just saw, we did it yesterday at the security, hot topics of security at NC State yesterday. There was a conference that was going on, and so it's pretty fresh in my mind. this is just a brief bit about us. If you've come here before, you probably heard the pitch. We do doctor, researcher facing app development. I'm just going to skip it for time. Basically, the challenge here is that we're in a high compliance environment. And we have to deal with HIPAA regulations, high trust, and a key bit of that is audit trails and documented processes, and then paperwork to show that we've been following the processes that we claim to be following. So that's really the key for compliance. You can do quite a lot of things, but you just have to say what you're going to do and then be able to show that you actually are doing it. And the range of what you're supposed to be doing is actually pretty broad, but you need to be able to show that you are doing what you said you were going to do. So, let's see. So this is just a journey of where we've been. Basically, we got a lot of stuff done really quickly. It's because we've hired some awesome people. Like I said, it's a great place to work. This is cloud security. Basically, what you need to consider here is that there's different levels of security that you need to consider. This is the cloud, which for us is Amazon. And we assume Amazon takes care of their own security. Then there's our actual application. We need to worry about security in our application. And then thirdly, we need to worry about the stuff that's not technical, but like the people problem of security, which is, pretty big, like letting someone in the door who shouldn't be in the door. This is what we would consider sort of tenets of the way we want to work. So assume compromise, which is something I like to say when we put our network in here. We said just make it kind of like a really nice Starbucks, but don't treat it like a special office. So we'd like to be able to, our general working model is that it doesn't matter where we are. We just happen to have a really nice place to work when we're in town. But there shouldn't be something special about this infrastructure, for instance. Track everything. This is pretty commonplace stuff. Automate because people are the weakest link. I have a little bit of a problem with that. Automation is the weakest link if you're mostly doing automation, and people are the weakest link if you're mostly doing people. But basically, you're always going to have a weak link. You're just sort of moving it back and forth, depending on what your balance is. Products, folks got secure by design, engage everyone for security and transparency over security. So, the last three could really be summarized, and we assume that everyone here is interested in building a secure product. One thing that's different about Lifomic is that, in the past, you work at a company, you assume QA is done by other people. You just build the product. And eventually we all wised up and said, okay, yeah, test cases and QA are kind of like a development job too. I think it's about time we do that for security. And so we just had that as a built-in model from the beginning. Okay, so this is the air gap. And I don't know if you guys are familiar, but air gap is a phrase that's used a lot in physical networks, where you'll have a network that is completely isolated and there's no physical connection between that network and anything else. Well, if we're in the cloud, we're communicating with it. Obviously, our customers are communicating with it. We can't really have an air gap solution, but we can come pretty close. And so for us, I'm not sure if it says it. The real air gap is this bullet here. There's no standard long-lived access to that environment. So there's no SSH access into production. There's no VPN server waiting for connections. There's no direct connect, AWS, VPNs. The production environment stands by itself in isolation. It exposes our application, of course, that's what it's there for. But from a development standpoint, you don't go in and out. It's not a back and forth thing. It's an isolated box. It exposes what it exposes, and that's it. Now, obviously, we do make changes to it, and so that's really the trick. Is the rest of this presentation is we want to have that environment that's like totally locked down. How do you deploy stuff into it safely, securely? So internal engineers only access the application logs and temporary read-only access. This is just because we expose our logs to Sumo Logic, which is a great logging system if you guys ever have to look for external logs. And internal users should not access modified systems. It's just what I said before. We don't reach into production really ever. Yes?
So you made the point that it does its own update and that's an outbound poll.
Yeah, something like that.
And more and more, even beyond the OS, applications are now doing their own updates.
Yeah.
And when you incorporate that software in your software, so have you gone through the provenance, like we were talking about on Docker, of all of the software that you include in your images so that something isn't going outbound on your internet and pulling something in from the outside?
Me personally, yes.
Or-
I've gone through every single line of code.
Well,
that we
so
package.
that's my point. Is your talk? Do you have automation for that going?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, you're right to point out. It's essentially an unsolved problem. You have to trust something. So there's a certain level of trust we place on our dependencies. We do have some code scanning tools. I'll talk about that at the end of it. And it's not totally a polling thing. Our OSs don't auto-update. Our packages that are deployed don't auto-update. And so we actually don't really auto-update that often. But I'll get to it for sure. And it's impossible to audit everything. I mean, even if you just took just one module that we depend on hundreds of modules, thousands of modules probably. We haven't done a personal audit of any of them.
The reason the topic comes up is I was recently at Credit Suisse. A guy was doing a presentation on Cree LED
Yeah,
lighting.
yeah, I was there.
Okay, and he said, hey, our Cree lighting comes out to Cree and does a free
Yeah.
update of your environmental software. And I
Yeah.
go, you install into banks, don't you?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, but you're picking between like two evils, I think. So, what's the question?
They may or may not be working on that, so make it more secure.
Yeah. So the gate is just basically, if we ever have to try to go in and circumvent some of this stuff, it's extremely locked down through IAM roles and MFA and whatnot. I'm skipping this. No, this is just a summary of what we've already said, which is that everything is short-lived, least access. This is not really. All right, so this is the real question you guys care about. The first couple of slides were just an overview of our security architecture. So the question is, how do you keep a production system like this running, locked down, while still keeping developers productive? So what we got is the pipeline into the gap. So this is just what you'd expect. All we do is we code, we build, and then we deploy. And what we really care about here is the deploy, and we deploy into dev, test, infra, prod, and actually there's another environment called security. But the deploys to each of those environments works the same. So this is close to what you were pointing at, is how do we make sure that the code is good before we deploy? So for us, everything is code reviewed. We have test cases. Test cases are essentially enforced by the code review. If you have people who are putting changes up for review and we don't have associated test cases, it's a cultural thing to reject it. We don't do any enforcement of code coverage on every project, though the projects I'm involved with typically have code coverage requirements. Not that 100% is good, but you don't accidentally get to 100.
What are you using for the tests? I assume the tests are part of CD, so it's automated.
Yep.
Are you using SonarQube or something?
We use Jenkins for the main sort of CD system, and the test cases technically are project by project will decide what they use, but most of them use Ava because we're just a solid JavaScript shop. Okay, so let's say we run the build, the test pass. This is after a merge into master. So code review's been good. Tests were in the initial checkout build. Then we merge into master, we rerun the tests. We do vulnerability scans with something called Sneak, which is an open source module detector. It will flag if we have any module dependencies with known vulnerabilities, and it'll just fail to review. And then we also use something called Veracode, which is a little bit more fancy. It does some static and dynamic analysis. And the output from our builds are just standalone Docker images. And so we are using Docker not as our final runtime target, because we actually have just exclusively Lambdas in production. We don't run Docker in production. But we do use Docker as a way to package up the thing that will do the deployment into production. So you can think of these Docker images as basically fancy RPMs. So there are RPMs that come with the OS they need to run. It's like, one level out of what an RPM used to be. So if you are inside an AWS environment and you have this container, like let's say it's a container that stands up a billing system. You have the container, you have an AWS environment, you say, go, and it reaches out into its environment and it makes the modifications it needs to make to the environment in order to stand itself up. And then once it's done standing itself up, Docker actually shuts down, and what's left is just a bunch of lambdas and infrastructure. That makes sense? So we're not running Docker in production. We're using Docker as a way to get production up and running. And so we have these Docker images that are the build artifacts. And so we push these build artifacts into S3, and we put them in S3 because S3 is one of the few places that can be accessed by multiple AWS accounts. So we'll see how that works later. Yeah, so the old way, this is what you would do pre our work here is you would have Jenkins running in your infra account. You would have a full-time VPN connection to production. You would have a set of scripts to run. Jenkins would execute the scripts and modify the production environment directly. That's what we did at our last company. It works really well. The problem then is that basically your production account is only as secure as your entire infrastructure account. So if Jenkins gets compromised and you have it along with VPN connection to production, now you're significantly more vulnerable.
Question about your S3 bucket. What's your bucket policy look like if you're allowing multiple accounts to reach into it?
It's read access from prod.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, there's not much you can do there. You can fetch files. Yeah. But we don't keep secrets in the files anymore. So, okay. So then you would do, like I said, changes to infrastructure with shell scripts, hopefully, or some provisioning. You might provision over SSH, and then you get these bastion jump boxes in order to reach in and fix stuff when it doesn't work. And so what we've done is, I described it before, we build Docker images that hold it. We happen to choose most, again, the sort of the API contract for our deployments are, you give me an image, I'll run the image and it'll deploy. Almost every project chooses to put Terraform inside that image and use Terraform to deploy out. That's not strictly needed, but it's a great tool. I was hoping to give a talk on it later, but maybe I'll delay if I'm doing this one tonight. And then we have share nothing environments. And really that just means that the environments are bringing everything they need with them. So like our production account doesn't depend on anything in info, for instance. It depends on access to the S3 just to get its deployment files, but the runtime standpoint, prod stands by itself, dev stands by itself. There's no connections between the environments.
Are you signing the images?
Yeah, of course.
Just to go back one step,
yeah.
You say the images don't contain secrets, so you must be getting other stuff. Right? I mean, you're not bringing everything.
No, we really are. Yeah, we're really bringing everything in. They don't contain secrets because the way we typically work with secrets is that so for instance, I just did a Postgres deployment. And so the way Postgres deployments will work is it will stand up a Postgres server, then it'll look in that environment to see, is there already a Postgres secret that's been generated here? And if so, use it. If not, make a new secret, a random password in the environment, and then use it for that Postgres server I just stood up. And so I actually don't even know my own passwords for my accounts. I just know that Postgres has a secret, and if I was lucky enough to be in the environment, I know how I could get it, but I can't really get it.
So the secret itself is almost ephemeral.
The secret itself is, yeah, it's ephemeral, because if you were to go into the environment and say remove that cached secret, your next deployment would likely see, oh, there's no secret here. Okay, let me make a new one. Okay, let me reset Postgres the secret.
So you don't store the secret anywhere. How do you randomly generate the secret?
That's what he's getting at. What secret is your?
Well, we use some cryptographic
Some way.
Yeah.
You're not storing the secrets like with Vault or.
We're storing them in AWS's SSM. So that's the
Parameter store.
parameter store.
You saw the
you're
secrets
not switching.
manager.
Yeah, well, you can only move so fast, right? That was this morning. I'm sure we've got some.
It just came out
about
last
it.
week. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So we use Terraform. I don't want to go into this too much, but it's just a declarative infrastructure tool. It's sort of like CloudFormation if you're used to AWS terms. It's definitely nicer than CloudFormation because it targets more than just AWS. We use it for PagerDuty setup as well. I'm probably going to do a different talk on that, so I won't go into it. All right, so here's the meat of it. I already said we had Jenkins, and we've got our deployment artifacts sitting in S3, and then we've got our production account. And this is just saying nothing comes in. Well, obviously that's not totally true because we do want to do something to trigger a deploy. So we have a Lambda sitting in production that will accept connections. And you can think of this like, this is an API on our application, basically. Our application happens to have an API that says, deploy this update. And so what we do is from Jenkins, we call it the deploy this update instance, or this function, and it will kick off a ECS task. This is what's going to run Docker ultimately. And it's going to, we have a poll thing, but it's going to download the image, the Docker image that I said would do the standing up of the environment. So we say, hey, kick off a new job. Here's some details of the job. ECS is going to come. It's going to download the image that the deploy job referenced. It's going to run it as it would a Docker image. And then we're going to pull the job status from Jenkins just to get console output. But so the weak point here is this launch deploy job, right? So if you could imagine somebody could post, if they could find a way to upload artifacts to our S3 bucket, if they could figure out that we have this Lambda function that does deployments, theoretically they could hijack our deployment system. But then there's also a secret we use to sign our request to do deployments. And so we would then have to hijack yet one more thing. Right? So you can't think of a way to get it more secure. I mean, eventually at some point you're going to have some level of trust there. And so we've got it down to just, there's a shared secret between the environments. Prod will trust the secret. And, you know, I guess if you were to hijack the secret, we could always rotate the secret if you would do any little bit. That's how we sign the artifacts. And so what happens is, this is a little bit higher level, so maybe it's a good time to, 18, a little bit good time to pause and just ask general questions about how the technical deploy would happen. This is a little high level, and then I have more slides on this change management bot, which it will help us analyze whether changes going out to production should be allowed or not without a human approval. So it's a little bit of a switch here in content. This previously was about continuous delivery. The next slide is more about automated process. Any questions about the CD, CI stuff before I go on?
You use the same sort of workflow in your non-prod environments, like
Yeah.
station. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But does it just minus the human approval though? You just
We don't do human approval for the,
right.
yeah.
So
In fact, most of the time we don't do human approval even for products. Yeah, I'll show you guys how that works.
Is the gate sort of like if it passes all the regression tests? And
Yeah, there's a series of checks we do, and if they pass everything, then we'll go without the, which is good. Yeah.
So kind of stuck on Postgres secret thing.
Sure.
So Postgres comes up. He goes, "Oh, I don't see something in." You said SSM. I'm not familiar with that.
Sure. This is secret store.
Secret store. Okay. So he goes, "I don't see anything there, so I'm going to generate and put it out there."
Yep.
Does that mean that if that it has credentials to put the credentials out there, even if they are there, so it could stomp them if it wanted to, like if it was compromised for some reason?
I'd have to review our policy, but I would be willing to bet you probably could.
Okay.
Yeah. In some cases, you do want to overwrite existing secrets, but yeah, I would probably so.
Okay. And then all the clients just take it from there.
Yep.
And they don't have access to the upfield at all.
That's right. Yeah.
Do you blue-green deploy in your production? And if so, does air gap affect that?
I'll break it into two parts. We only do a very minimal blue-green deploy. So I said we deployed with Lambdas today. Really, everything we do is Lambdas. And Lambdas are support versioned Lambdas. And so what we have, this doesn't cover it, but what our architecture looks like is we have API gateway from Amazon at the front, and then it's all Lambdas behind. And so for the Lambdas, we have versioning turned on for a significant number of them. And the API gateway is pointing at an alias. And so what happens on the deployments is we'll stand up a new version of the Lambda without moving the alias. We'll hit the Lambda directly for a couple checks just to make sure that it's alive and like not mispackaged, just like honeybees, webpacks, so sometimes it gets all funky. And as long as it's healthy, then we'll switch the alias and run. It's kind of blue-green deployed, not as much as we'd like. We could do that. Definitely.
You said you're using the Docker image to build up the Lambda environment. Is that using a service from Amazon that does that? Or is that something that you built yourself?
Well, we do. So let's break it down, I think. So here, we take advantage of Terraform to do the actual stand-up. And the execution of Docker and Terraform inside it is handled by AWS ECS tasks. Okay. I forget if we use batch or if we just kick off a task. We played with batch for a while. The problem is it's got a really slow startup. And so we might have just gone to ECS tasks directly. Yeah. But it's basically the same thing. It's either one of them, batch or tasks, will let you give it an image and just say, just run it. And when it's done, like when it exits, the process exits, just kill it. We don't care anymore. So it's like a one-shot run on Docker images, which is a little weird compared to usual Docker usage. Anything else? No? Okay. Right, so that's just the technical version of if we had something we wanted to put into production, how would we get it there? Like, how is it going to flow? But like I said in the beginning, we're a highly regulated industry with healthcare and health data, personally identifiable information. And so we have to have a fair number of processes in place. And so what we first start with is like what everyone does, where when you go to production, you need to justify why you're making a change to production. You need to list what you are planning to change. You need to have an audit trail of what you changed. You need to have a human sign off and say, like, yeah, this is following the processes that we talked about, and I'm okay with these changes. And so that's what this is here. Basically, we trigger a deploy, we create a change management ticket, we have to use Jira. And then we pause our deploy. So that actually the deploy kicks off the trigger and it says, hey, somebody's trying to push something to prod. So make the Jira ticket, link to the ticket, link to the thing that's trying to be deployed, and then pause. And then we have a change management bot that looks at that to decide whether it's going to be good or not. And it might say, yeah, the following slides will show you how it makes this decision, but it might say, yeah, and in that case, it's just going to go ahead and approve the ticket automatically, and then the deploy is going to resume. And it might say, no, something's weird. We're going to have to do a human approval, and then we'll just wait for the typical human approval. And this is just Jira. So this is just automated Jira. This is just human Jira. Nothing too fancy there. And then after we resume, what happens is we stage the deploy files. This is just putting the files up so that they're accessible to prod through the S3 bucket. Then we're going to launch the deploy job. This is what I was describing before. We launch a deploy job. We make sure that the signature is valid. This is what protects us from just somebody randomly executing our Lambda function. They say, hey, deploy this one. So we don't be able to do that. I don't know if we've ever done any stats on that. If we've ever had someone try to deploy an invalid signature. It'd be kind of interesting to see if we have. I'm not sure. I'm not sure we've actually done that test.
So you've got all this security, but you've never tested it.
Oh, we certainly tested that you can't do it. What we haven't tested is anyone actually trying to do it. So we know the signature check works. We just don't know, is anyone trying to break it? I'm not sure.
You have an opening for a pen tester?
Our security officer.
Actually, yeah. Well, we have. Yeah. So then we have, so this kicks off the ECS task. This is going to get the file, run the Docker container. It runs it, and then the job's going to complete. All right, so bot. I have, you see what time it is? Is it 8:03? All right, I got a couple minutes. So this is actually my part of the presentation. So before the bot, what would happen is a human would say, hey, I want to deploy these things to prod. It's been like 3 days since my last push. And then it's going to sit there and try to figure out, like, what did I do the last 3 days? What's actually in this change ticket? How many things did I change? Did I fix some bugs? I don't remember. And then you're just going to write it out, like me literally typing out what I changed. And then I'm just going to wait and hope that somebody's not driving home or going to the bathroom. It's like, I just want to get it done. I just want to get it deployed because it's got a bug fix that I want. And it's just really inefficient. It's inefficient because I can't remember. I have a horrible memory. I don't really know like what the change management guy wants to see. And what I do kind of know he wants a ton of details, so I don't want to have to dig every single link to every single Jira ticket, every bug. And then I'm going to have to wait after I do all that work. And the human reviewer side really isn't any better because I got to dig through all that information, right? Like even if I was nice enough to provide him with links to all of my PRs, he's got to click through each of those PRs and see, was it really peer reviewed by somebody other than him, right? Like this is an enormous amount of clicking, especially a couple days or weeks worth of changes would just be overwhelming. So it just really doesn't happen. Right? Check to see if the security scan was run. That one's a little easier because it's just one, you know, from the last build. But then this is the killer one. Like, do I trust the list of changes? And having been motivated to write the bot to begin with, you absolutely should not trust it because the guy crafting it, like me, you just put whatever's going to get it approved in the list. I mean, because you know that he's not going to take the time to dig through and make sure that you did it accurately. And even if you do, he's not going to be able to check all at once to make sure it's done. So, I mean, it's all sort of a wash. I mean, nobody's winning in this scenario, certainly not security. So I was motivated because I saw this is like a win-win. You can automate this process. You can get all the details you want, you get all the verifications you want, and you can get it without waiting. So it was a no-brainer for the investment on my side. So what the human submitter does now is he describes, just for the sake of an audit trail, why would I bother promoting fraud? And this is not like what I changed. It's just some human reason for why you would want to make a change to production. And full disclosure, I don't know if this is getting posted online, my description is literally always the same. It says new builds are better than old. So that is always my summary text. And then Jenkins provides the reference to the build that was getting deployed. So I don't do anything, really. I just provide this one little copy and paste snippet. I say the same thing every time. And then the automation can look at that and say, okay, great. I know what the last time you promoted was, because I got a history in Jira. I know what that build was. I know the build you're trying to promote. If I can go through, I can dig through all the changes that are new in this build. I can look at Bitbucket. I can see if every one of those changes was reviewed by a peer. If it wasn't the original author, that's something that can happen. I can go through the Jenkins logs. I can look to see if the security scan was run. And then I can always pawn to a human if I don't like what I see. I'm not going to reject the deployment. I'm just going to leave a message and say, I don't know, I wouldn't approve it if I were you. Great, basically what the bot says. And it describes why. You'll see this too. So here's a little bit of a description, a visual description of what I just said out loud. So Jira comes in, it sees a new approved CM ticket. The bot picks it up through a webhook. It says, great. Well, the first thing I need to know is find the previous approval. So maybe this is the first time the project's getting deployed. There's no previous approval. That's fine. It's a human intervention. It says, I can't do much with this. Everything in this project is new. It should just be going out at all, right? And then that's going to be the approval. So everyone after the first one can be a little bit more automated. So I'm going to say there's 3 changes between the previous approval and the new one. We just go ask Jenkins, what was that? Give me all the Git hashes for those changes. We use Bitbucket for our PRs, code review. So we go to Bitbucket and say, we need a pull request associated with these commits. Let me look at the commits. And I can see who the author on the commit was. I can see who gave peer review feedback. I can see who approved or didn't approve. And as long as you're getting the appropriate number of peers reviewing your code, then that's all going to be accepted. And then we can look at security scans. Was Snoop run, was Veracode run, were there any vulnerabilities found in that build? And if there weren't, well, I mean, whatever comes back, right? We get the info we get. And then we make some judgment. And the first thing that happens is we leave a comment about the judgment in the change management ticket. So we'll say, forget about approval for a second. Here's what I think of this situation. Like, here's the state of the world for reviews. Here's the state of the world for security scans. This is what I would do if I were you. And after a couple of weeks of running with just that comment enabled, and our security guy saying, yeah, this looks good every time. Like, this is great. It's got great level of detail. And we immediately found that people were not describing, like, because we gave them the opportunity to list what had changed, and then the bot would come in and say what did change, and it was like night and day difference. I mean, sometimes people would say there was stuff changing that didn't, and they would leave off stuff that was, and it was just, I mean, it was immediately apparent that the list of things that people were making for themselves was just wildly inaccurate. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, that's really what I was trying to say in that first slide. It's not worth it. So eventually the security guy looks at this stuff for a week and he says, the bot is always right on. So why don't I just accept it? I'm not going to do any better than this. All I'm doing is I'm looking at its judgment, I'm clicking the button. So it's fine. So we turn it on. And so now, assuming that everything is approved, we just go ahead and approve the ticket and the human doesn't have to worry about it. And there's some cases where the human still does. I'll show you one. So this is a kind of example that you would see for an approval. So again, this is a summary. It says, basically, as the bot, I'd approve it because we did what we were supposed to do. We have the previous approval was here, which is fine. There's some issues around previous approvals, like you could try to have like deploy an older build than with the latest one, and the bot will not accept that because it looks like you're taking changes out of production. We're just going to make the broad assumption that you don't want to take changes out of production without approving it, right? So all these kind of weird edge cases will fall out of this. This one just says there's really only two changes here. One was the actual work, which was approved by somebody else, and then there was a merge. It just merged this change in. Now the merge is actually an interesting corner case here because if you use the merge, the auto merge in Bitbucket or any of the tools, it merges in, but like there's no human that's actually reviewed that merge, right? So if you're using Git on the command line, you could definitely craft a quote merge commit that includes non-merging changes, right? Like there's nothing that's too, just because it says merged in and it looks like it came from Bitbucket, but there's still possibility of people putting changes in there that make real functional changes. And so one of the exceptions to the everything is auto-approved, or everything is approved by peers, is we have some detection that says, basically, if this merge commit added no new logic, if there's no new code here, then it's okay. And it can be treated as if it was approved. So getting that right is a little tricky, just especially with parallel branching, but it's not impossible to figure out in most cases. Basically, we call it an empty commit. Is it just a marker that says merge this in? Or was there an actual change there? If there's a real change there, if there's some real diff that's different, then we're going to treat it as like, no, you tried to sneak a code change in through a merge commit. So it'll catch that. And then we do the security scan. Night scan was detected, no problems found. I mean, this is almost always true because if there was a security scan that had a vulnerability, your build would have failed in the first place. So you probably wouldn't have gotten this far. But it is a check we want to make sure we have. So here's one that failed because people didn't follow the process. And so again, summary says, like, if I were you, I wouldn't approve this. And here's why. The reason is that these two in particular here. So force pull of Docker image says commit was not approved by others and is not an empty merge commit. So I don't know what sec 230 is, but force pulling Docker images was not something that was reviewed by other people. And I mean, we've made it hard in Bitbucket to merge without an approval, but I mean, given just the various level of access, it's not impossible to circumvent it. This is just the last check before it goes out to prod. This one is particularly weird here because it's you got one change that looks just like a merge. That's a really weird change here. And probably what happened on that one is that Git and Bitbucket support this notion of a squash commit, where you had this long list of changes that you put up for PR. And then if you choose to squash commit, you're saying, I want to just take all those, munch them into one, and deliver it as a single commit. And right now, we don't support that. We don't support detecting that it was reviewed. The reason is because what happens is you basically said, I know you checked all this stuff out, and you approved it. Because I can look at the, like, see, it's even got a PR number. It says, if I look at this, it'll probably appear as if people approved it. But what happened under the covers is they took all these changes with unique hashes. People signed off on those hashes. And then, just because of the way Squash works, is it says, thank you, I'm going to make a new commit, I promise. It's all the same. And I'm going to deliver that. Well, I mean, from a security standpoint, I don't trust that. I mean, you just said, this is a Squash commit. Trust me, it's the same. Like, and it seems like it'd be really easy to just verify that, you know, those approvals, like the code is the same. So we use the diff between changes in order to detect empty commits. So my first thought was, this is no problem. They approve these changes. I have the whole range, and I have a squash. If the diffs are the same, then I will accept it. That seems legit. But Bitbucket loses that ability to diff on changes that have been squashed because they're basically they're no longer referenced by any of the Git like trees. So if you had a copy locally of the repo pre-squash, you could probably calculate it. But I don't happen to have that. I just trust that Bitbucket had it. And so they don't expose an API that lets me say, give me the pre-squash commit diff. If they did, then we could enable this. So I'm sure that's what happened here. Is somebody did a squash commit because they didn't want some data history. But anyway, and again, it's fine. It actually doesn't reject it. All it says is you made a choice, and now you're going to have to wait for a human to review. I wouldn't have done that. I mean, I wouldn't have done that. That's a pain. I'd rather just have a long commit history. So this is really like the thing that gets me most excited. I guess I'll go for 45 minutes. So I could spend at least 6 minutes in this slide here. I mean, to me, this is like the root of DevOps, which is how do you make interesting cultural changes for the better of your organization? And the thing that stood out when we did this is that basically that's the key, right? Like developers want to be able to push production really quickly. And so if you give them a way to do that, they will bend over backwards to make it happen. So you see people slamming each other for not getting peer reviews, not necessarily because they want peer reviews, but they don't want to be blocked to promote fraud, right? So I don't want to have to wait because you chose to deliver something that wasn't peer reviewed. Or like the squash commit thing. I said, don't ever use squash commit. You're blocking me from going to fraud without a human. It's not worth it, right? And so you have people arguing for, basically, in both cases, it's improved audit trail security because I just want fast approvals. And it's cool because like our security guy didn't say, you can't use squash commits. You know, you have to get peer review. We never had this discussion because it just happens naturally. People want fast delivery fraud. And so it's just a self-policing system, all because we enabled the ability to like take advantage of it. So I'm constantly trying to figure out what more we can gain in order to incentivize the right behaviors. I think it's really, really neat. We definitely have some other ideas about what we could do. One we were talking about before was like, if you have outstanding security bugs that haven't been fixed in your project, then you should have to have your changes to fraud delivered. But if you have reduced the number of security fixes since your last one, you can push to fraud even if you haven't cleaned them all up, right? So imagine this. Let's say you got project that's got 4 outstanding security vulnerabilities. And if you don't fix any of them, you have to wait for a human to review all of your pushes to prod. You fix one vulnerability, and you can push to prod for free without a human, right? I'm not saying you have to fix them. I'm just saying if you do, you don't have to wait for a human to review your pushes to prod. That's pretty nice, right? And again, it's another one where it's like, I'm not telling you you need to fix your high priority vulnerabilities. It's just really advantageous if you do. And I bet you all of our issues would be fixed like that. Because I don't want to wait. I'd happily fix a P1 vulnerability in order to get it done. Right? So then there's probably just many more things like that. It's just a matter of figuring out and then taking the time to build it. So it's been really fun. Fun to build and fun to see how it plays out. So, and that's the end. This was really informal. Thanks for being patient with me. Any thoughts on the second half of that? Yeah.
Squash bits. As long as you get squash it before the review.
You can squash before the review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is, you have multiple environments. Do they all deploy off the same Docker image? Does that make sense? Like the same? Okay.
Yep.
Like a Docker
exactly
the stage.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. How if something makes it into, I assume it's built off master or something like that.
Sure.
So if something makes it into master, fails stage,
yep.
Other things get merged into master in the meantime.
Yep.
Does that stop the bus from, does that stop the deploy bus? So it's a bad thing doesn't get put to prod when someone else's good change goes in?
Well, so there's not exactly. You have the typical problem of you've got commits in there that maybe, let's just say you don't want it in prod, even if they're not bad, right? You had something that was in stage and you found a problem, but in dev, you've got a couple other fixes that have gone in. I mean, this is like an unavoidable issue, but the way that we would deal with that is that you could do a side branch of a fix that was just like a targeted fix for stage, and you would do a Jenkins build with it. There's no reason you can't promote that up ahead. Like you could cheat if you want. I mean, it's not even cheating, right? You just say, I'm just going to do a one-off build with a targeted branch, and then I'm going to promote it to stage and prod. There's no reason it has to go linear. It just happens to most of the time.
And that would wipe out. So, for instance, if they're currently trying to debug the bad problem, wouldn't that wipe out stage? Or do you have multiple stage instances?
It would probably wipe out stage. But to be honest, I mean, even then, there's no reason it wouldn't be the wisest thing to do. But nothing about this presentation would prevent you from just saying going directly from dev to prod with that build. Okay. You could skip an environment. It doesn't. There's no thing in our process that requires you to hit every target before. Okay. Again, might not be wise, but you could do it. Yeah.
Did you have to have this certified, like by an outside party, like by a HIPAA or maybe by Duke Medical, one of your customers or something today?
Yeah, I mean, we've gone. That was one of the.
How long did that take? How much of the pain was it?
I'm not the ideal person to answer that question, but we've gone through HIPAA certification in what's called high trust, which is a little stricter version of HIPAA, of the simplification. But and both of them will have auditors come in and review our practices. But honestly, I don't want to make you guys lose faith in the audit and security compliance, but I mean, what we're doing is so proactive that the auditors are just like, yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to say whatever you want to do is okay, because most companies we see aren't even thinking about building systems that are like this. So is it perfect? Maybe not, but it's way better than everything I've seen in the last 6 months. So you're good. Like, this is fantastic. Are you kidding me? You can see the audit trail of every single change that's gone in and whether it's gone through. I mean, it's just so much better than what's out there. It hasn't been an issue. Yeah.
Don't whip out another slide deck to answer this question, but I'm wondering what is your strategy for rollbacks or severe issues in prod after you've gone through this process?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's sort of like what you were saying before. I mean, how do you fix prod? And sometimes a rollback, it depends on what's changed, but sometimes a rollback can be as simple as taking the previous build Docker image and just saying just redeploy it. So if it's a bundle of Lambda code, for instance, and all the deploy does is like just put a new version of Lambda up, and here's the code that's going to go in. So if you just have a targeted bug fix, or let's say a targeted bug injection in one build, and the build before didn't have it, well, you just take the old build and just deploy it again. It's going to overwrite the old version. Like the version numbers aren't baked in. It just says just replace whatever's out there with this thing, so you can just redeploy. That's the simple case. I mean, a harder one would be, well, what if the old version that didn't have a database in it? It's going to start tearing down databases, maybe. I mean, you just have to evaluate it. So sometimes we would just call roll forward. You say, well, I mean, it is what it is. You're going to have to spin a one-off build like I described and then deploy it. But sometimes it's just put the old version. Of course, if you have an approval for an old build that has been approved, and you try to just deploy it again, it's going to say, no, you can't do that. It's been closed. You've already used this CM ticket. You have to open up another CM ticket. And when you do, then the bot's going to say, what? You're trying to take changes out? Because all I see is that prod has more changes than this build does. I'm not going to approve that. You can't take stuff out. I mean, all the stuff you're taking out was approved. That doesn't make it okay.
Does that mean it's easier to repair the problem while it's running in prod and
well, yeah, I'll tell you, if you can get peer reviews faster than you can get security reviews, then yes. Because if you can get a fix with peer reviews, I can deploy to prod essentially without any block. But if I have to roll back, I will need at least 2 security approvals to justify taking code out. So in some ways, if it's especially if it's the last build and you know the fix, it's easier to get the fix out. Yeah.
It makes sense in those kind of situations to use feature switches so that if something did make it out there, you wouldn't necessarily have to redeploy.
True.
You could just switch it off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
You monitor using an Opta or something externally to make sure things are.
How do we monitor? Yeah, we use scheduled lambdas to hit our APIs, and we do CloudWatch alarms and alerts. We do Sumo. I don't know if we have any alerts. Do we have alerts set up watching Sumo metrics logs? We certainly have in the past.
Right
I don't
now,
know if
most
we
of
do
the
right now.
CloudWatch funneled into PagerDuty.
Yeah, good. But we've set up Sumo logic to PagerDuty stuff before. That's worked really well.
We like the CloudWatch way because you can do the Terraform descriptor of your CloudWatch alarm and also the PagerDuty in the same segment. So you can have the team who gets it also be the people adjust, okay, alarm fatigue, or is this, you know.
Yeah, again, I'd like to do a talk on Terraform because it's good. It's really powerful. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it.
How much of your deploy process would you guess relies on what serverless gives you? Like if you needed to change course and you needed to, deploy to QREC2 or if you decided to go Kubernetes or whatever, how much work would be involved in switching your deploy?
I know how I can talk for a subset of the services that are run. Again, the saving grace here is Terraform. Terraform allows you to have what they call Terraform modules. And so the modules let you encapsulate a bunch of infrastructure where you just provide inputs. And so a common pattern for all the services that I work with are we provide basically Lambda function code. And we say, this is going to be a Lambda function, just deploy it. And then the module, this is an in-house module. The module says, okay, well, in order to get a Lambda out there, I actually need to get IAM roles with the right access permissions. I need to get infrastructure. I need to get API gateway stuff. I need to do a bunch of stuff. So if I wanted to make a switch to say EC2, I could do it pretty quickly by just changing that Terraform module to do something other than Lambdas, right? So the Terraform module would stay called Lambda, which would be kind of weird, but there's nothing that would prevent me from, say, taking Lambda code. And in our case, we use something called serverless HTTP, not the serverless framework, but it's Koa inside of Lambda. And so actually taking our Lambdas and running them as HTTP servers is very easy to do. So we could move to EC2 or we'd probably more like to move to ECS.
Talk about,
Pretty
we
quickly.
went from ECS to Lambdas, right?
Yeah, we did migrate from ECS to Lambdas, and that's one of the reasons why we have this serverless HTTP. So we have HTTP, all of our Lambdas look internally like HTTP servers, and they expose, they're packaged as Lambdas. It's kind of inefficient, and you're not alone in thinking that it should be changed. We have multiple people who would like to see us get, like if we're going to go Lambda everywhere, like why do we have an HTTP router sitting inside of our Lambda? It's really easy for development, and it works, and it's not that bad, and it feels bad. It feels really good.
Well, ECS was HIPAA approved for a while. Lambda wasn't.
Oh,
Right?
Oh, sure.
So Matt lived this. Certain things had to be ECS for a good while, for
Right.
a year. And then when Lambda finally fell into the BAA for HIPAA, it effectively was the same ECS code for the most part because of the COA.
Right. Yeah, so we lifted our ECS instances and put them in Lambdas and then we support. But you're right, I'd kind of forgotten. I happen to live a world where I needed HIPAA services and not everyone did, so I had to do the move. But some people went straight Lambda the whole time.
Yeah.
Lucky them. Anything else? Yeah.
So on the commit message or the change message, you said you always put syntax. Is that just for compliance? As having that there?
Oh, I
It
know.
doesn't seem like
It's useless.
yeah. So is it just for compliance?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's something I haven't taken the time to put. You know, you only have like so much like social cred that you can burn, and so I have other battles to fight, and typing that one message in is not so bad. As far as I know, it's a required field in the form. So if I don't put anything in it, it fails. But if I put anything in it, it's okay. I thought that was kind of true. You built it better than all. That's right. Any other questions? Cool. Well, come talk to me about working and helping. And take some pizza. I just want 2 pizzas for my daughter.
Well, I guess we're not.
Matt, what's your last name?
Left.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking me if that's it. Let me steal your quote.
What's that?
The incentive changes culture.
Yeah,
Incentives
good.
change culture.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Unless you're going to tell me you took that from someone else.
JavaScript. So our key is JavaScript. It's not we have some
You're warm in here.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's like that time of year where
You guys looking at Jenkins X?
Jenkins X.
That's
Yes. So we use the original speaker backup. Now I'm using a modified plugin. We absolutely did. So I will look at that, and I will. So we clearly use Jenkins. Part of the reason I have a love-hate relationship with it. And part of it is because if you want to treat Jenkins as cattle, your EBS volume and storage and process are super important. It's like, oh, there's configuration actually. And no matter how much you encourage Jenkins files and pipelines, people still make $3,000. Like, well, I don't want to use it. It's like, well, you're going to use it. So anyway, so part of the reason is so we've got to the point where the EBS volume is so we know we can use those. To be honest with you, that's our like finish the build. So we don't really have those short stages here for those. So we are always ever. So if you can go away, you have to go to the S3 locus, find the last build job number, because that runs on Cron and Jenkins, and then go through Ruby code and say, hey, go Ruby code.
Whoa! You got it. You got it.
Next build number.
Well, I work for Cloud.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
We're, I haven't looked at it yet. It's just released last. Yes, right. I'm actually, we have a product like. This is sort of getting everyone that's looked at it, that's sort of the inside.
Basically the storage of the builds and where the build numbers are interesting. The other one is Jenkins secrets. Where do you see those? Right now we have a human where the password manager is the company. Right. Versus part of the reason we don't is only because we don't want to reach out to a third party. And part of the reason this all came up is part of that is we're as much self-contained and it only be a right off not our third parties. Shield ourselves from that. Right. It's not that we have
less administrative work on your end.
Well, less because some vendors won't sign VAs, even if because that means they have to be part of it. Right.
What enough banks?
Yeah,
I'm not trying to sell.
but
So I remember coming here, and there were no walls.
Yeah.
Facing that side.
Yeah.
Oh, really? So having the
I don't remember honestly.
the absolute security.
I've gone down to the rabbit hole of Ruby.
This is the first time
It's Ruby that I figured out that works. How do I go scale executors that JLP problem? Right, that's still a big one for us. Because every build has no other yeah, I do. I'll be right back. Yeah. Sorry. So what we realized, I think, is it really comes down to the plugin we're using that does ECS for Amazon. Amazon is scaling the ECS clustering of letting Jenkins. I'm the one that's like, and because that project is kind of been pretty stale, how much investment do we want to do in it? We debated. You've given me something to go look at now in Jenkins X, but we kind of want to get we are happy to pay for managed solutions, right? We pay for Cloud Jira, Cloud Bitbucket, Cloud Sumo on the cloud, and everything. But part of it was we initially started with this. We thought we would get away with not having Jenkins and just be able to use the Amazon batch, and then you realize all the things that you were used to in Jenkins from our prior lives, we're going to do with it. So I have a Groovy script, a set of scripts that get put into the initd Groovy or whatever. They boot up and wait 10 seconds, and they start setting up everything. The trick I'm trying to figure out is how do I want to basically leverage SSM for getting secrets out and setting them in there. But finding the right magic Ruby code and examples on GitHub is like few and far between. So anyway, if you have any pointers, I would love all yours. Please, yeah. My name's Chris Hemp. Yeah. Matt Hicks. Nice to meet you. Brad Oaks. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Brad's a old friend of mine from trying to resurrect the control model.
Oh, yeah?
Right.
I was thinking, I should start that up again. Like, it'd be a supporter of it. There's about a few of us around who enjoy it.
Yeah. Get the four of us together and see.
There are a few over at SAS.
Well, we're pretty free with our space. The only thing that is weird is like how it happened tonight, you know, like we end up perfect. But we're happy, we're happy to host. If it ends up ever being something because like when it's small, I know some folks end up like good beer spots. That's the drive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole serverless stuff reminds me a lot like Perl. With basically, it's like old school CGI style, like your function just executes this. Right? So it's funny living that again, having lived it already. And we've hit the edges of what Lambda offers. Not in, it's just
Which is the same thing.
no, actually, we're actually like $5.
Okay.
But it's really hard to make your. I mean, even with all the monitoring you do and all the things with Lambda, it's pretty cheap. Like they made it pretty worthwhile for at least the size we are and the main partner / customer we have up in Indianapolis where we're headquartered. And the real edge cases are around its handles of spikes. So Lambda's kind of scale based on consistent scale versus spiking. And so we have a set of other Lambdas that keep Lambdas warm. We're not happy by it, so we have that now. That's been running. We call it the Lambda warmer, and certain Lambdas need more warmth than others. Others don't. So we think of the, like the heat
Just sort of
lamps
like
for
hit it
food.
every 5 minutes or something, or you have some sort of time.
Yep. And it's tweakable in Terraform to say this service is hit the most, so it maybe needs to be warm by, let's do 25 requests over this time duration, or 100. Another one might just be 5. Part of the reason people get like 5 is, there's one, because Lambda is effectively a container, right? It's brought up in the background, and they charge you based on the RAM used. So the reason we Webpack is Webpack will make the RAM usage drop when you're on the runtime. And so they base it on, like, I think 64 or 128 megabytes. I forget the next stuff, 256 by 12 megabytes. Right, so if you can stay below the threshold, you're on the cheaper version because they charge based on RAM. Anyway, like what the warmer does is it keeps those containers hot, right? And makes it cheaper for when, like, we have a mobile app here that tracks fasting, and it shows, this is for the health care application around intermittent fasting is all the rage, but it's also kind of fits into a lot of cancer treatments. People, they want to say, I eat a time restricted food, and then we should be more ketosis oriented. And so doctors need a way of tracking it in addition to doing the big data thing. So we want to be the big data side and also the mobile play. Well, I'm not a doctor. I'm just parroting what basically up at Indianapolis, there's a set of clinicians who are tied to the hospital. So much like Duke down here is a university and a hospital, their doctors can be researchers as well because they're tied to a university. Same thing up in Indianapolis.
Purely
so far, yes.
Do you give your eyes on GDPR?
Yeah, so we know about it. We do see it on our horizon, but we're probably going to go after like SOC 2 and a few other things around high trust in the States first, and then go deal with GDPR once we have a real European story. Under the covers, like the right to be forgotten, we just did that because we thought it was the right thing to do. But you really can't just say that. You actually need, because GDPR is like high trust. You can have someone come in and certify it. So we would go. I think we're going to start that process probably Q4, probably end of this year via 2019. Or has it? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long since I've been involved in the front end. I just sort of hear, you know, so it's all this stuff, and I'm like, on the development, I was trying to get people who are, how much of an impact.
Oh, thank you. The big one is right to be forgotten, and how hard is it to do it if you didn't put that in place? One of the trickier things is when you have different clinics and they're separate, right? And we're a multi-tenant system. And let's say I'm a patient and there's 5. If I never go in and claim my details, like what sort of validation do you do when you say right to be forgotten if you haven't even claimed your data? Right? And so it's almost like you need to sign in, make an account, claim who you are, do the verification process, now flush everything. Right? We'll see if it comes to the States.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, it's not really testifying.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Right? A lot of the animated gifs I see in our Slack here of him being photoshopped into data from Star Trek, or if someone put a slider over his face of like smile, and then
Chris, I'll definitely find some new group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Thanks for hosting us. Absolutely, yeah.
And we'll definitely
Make it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll brainstorm an outline. Yeah, they've changed it now. They pro conference, yeah. I did, yeah. And I went this, and I'm going again this year. So yeah, it's far, but I like it. It's a good city. It's way better than
We have an office there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Indianapolis.
In here. Yeah. If I was like in this, really?